Auzubillahiminashaitanirrajim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Ji ayanum pakhair agale ni hao chunushumme washmale. Ohio gozaimasu, guten Morgen, hola, bonjour, privyet, kaifa hal? Hale shuma chatore, ahlan wa sahlan, marhaba, buna, mucho, gracias, swabia, balli kare aya. Hosh Galdin and Io Simon, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for tuning into PTV World. You're certainly watching World this morning alongside my very well-learned colleague, who happens to be Miss Hajar Sati. I happen to be Shahzad Hassan Khan. It's a fine sunny Tuesday morning over in Islamabad. The weather's trying to get a little colder, but we are still confused whether to turn on the fan or whether to turn off the fan. But first things first, hello Hajar, how are you doing today?
Assalamu alaikum, and thank you so much for introducing me. So you really wanted to ask me some question. What is that?
Yeah, all right. So this is something which actually came to my mind because me and my wife were having an argument last night, and she was like, you know what, you give me bare minimum. And I was like, hey, you know what, whatever I get, you know, my utmost priority is to kind of give you and my children the best lifestyle I can afford to have. And then there was something which I realized, and that was that imagine that women, children, and pets are the only beings which are loved unconditionally all across the globe. You know, so I'm not putting parents in it because parents will always have unconditional love for all their children. But what I wanted to kind of make, the only point which I wanted to make was that men are not loved unconditionally. And it's because of the fact that men, ladies and gentlemen, really need to provide in the first place. And if they provide, everything is spick and span. Only then they are being loved or being appreciated. For example, you know, in our culture, you know, my family will go to see the lady, you know, if in case I'm getting married. And, you know, once they come back, all my relatives will ask my parents whether the girl was pretty or not. You know, that's a very simple question. You know, that's what you're looking for. That's the prerequisite for a man to get married. But imagine, you know, if it's the girl's parents who are actually coming to my place to look at the boy, as soon as they're going to go back home, their relatives, the only question they're going to ask is, what does he do? How much money does he make? So that's something which actually makes me think that we men are not loved unconditionally. Now, what's your take on this?
Okay, I think I need you to sit in some feministic circle, and then you will definitely get some answer. So, okay, having said that, I don't think so that everyone gets the unconditional love when it comes to that.
Thank you.
And you remind me of one of the Western intellectual thinker called Jordan Peterson, and he says that men in the 21st century are asking too hard to feminize, right? So, traditional men was more into the duties of, providing the what do you call livelihood for their families.
Even still.
And now they are being asked to also raise the kids with them. So there's this reactionary movement which is coming up against the feminism, and you remind me of that. But having said so, I do feel that there are a lot of pressure on the women when it comes to the rishtas or the matchmaking when it comes to that. So it's not just the beauty that is one of the factors which determines that if the rishta gets done or not.
Okay.
There are a lot of other factors, you know,
probably
if
whether
she's a doctor or not. And after the marriage, they're going to ask the doctor bahu or the bride not to work, then to have their kids raised and whatnot and look after the family. But I do feel, yes, that men are a lot of times are very undue. They're pressurized into giving a very good lifestyle. That should not be the case. And I do feel that one of the peril of this modernity is that we ask ourselves to get so much material goods that we somehow lose the stream of the contentment and satisfaction when it comes to that.
You know, I mean, in addition to that, obviously there's a cascade of challenges, you know, for men and women both. That's agreed. But it was on a lighter note in the first place, and then, you know, if you're going to label that, you know, if we were in a conversation of feminists, you know, the tables would have turned. But I happen to, I myself, I'm a feminist, ladies and gentlemen, because my definition of a feminist is that a feminist would talk about equality. You know, it won't actually kind of take priorities with genders. I think what they would rather do is that equal distribution of resources for men and women at the same time. That's my definition of feminism. But with that, okay, you know, let's take a break and let's get started with the show too as well. First up, top stories. Haja, what do we have in the first place?
Lovely. So, Government of Pakistan and United Nations are jointly launching a flash appeal in Geneva today for $800 million on the basis of updated on-ground need assessment of the flood situation in the country. A revised flood response plan prepared in close coordination between the Government of Pakistan and United Nations will be shared at the event. The plan focuses on providing necessary assistance to the vulnerable people affected by the unprecedented floods. Minister for Climate Change, Sherry Rahman, will attend the event in person in Geneva, whereas Minister for Planning and Development, Ehsan Iqbal, Minister for Economic Affairs, Ayaz Sadek, and Minister of State for the Foreign Affairs Hina Rabani Khar will participate virtually from Islamabad. UN Under-Secretary General for the Humanitarian Affairs and Emergency Relief Coordinator Martin Griffiths and Director General World Health Organization Dr. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus will represent the UN along with the resident coordinator in Pakistan, Julian. The meeting will be attended by UN member states as well as the various UN agencies and humanitarian organizations working in the area of disaster relief. I mean, this is what happens when the news cycle moves on. A tragedy is forgotten, but I think the UN is doing a wonderful job in walking the talk around the climate change narrative because Pakistan needs it most. So we are in the phase where we are dispersing the immediate aid, but when it comes to rehabilitation, Pakistan has a way long to go. And the problem and the tragedy is Pakistan does not have a contribution in creating such a situation where we're facing flooding and such kind of climate-induced calamities.
Exactly, and thank you very much for making that point because it is a valid one as well, where we see the international community finally realizing that we're not the ones who have actually contributed to such a catastrophe. But now we're going to talk about the ones who've contributed to a catastrophe themselves. Ladies and gentlemen, imagine that Minister for Information Broadcasting, Ms. Maryam Aurangzeb Sahiba, has said criminal investigation will be carried out into the recent audio leaks of PTI Chairman Imran Khan regarding diplomatic cipher. Addressing a conference in Islamabad, she said the responsibility to his effect has been entrusted to a committee of the FIA, which will work without any political interference. The information minister said the PTI chairman has confessed his crime of playing with the cipher in the audio leaks. She said Imran Khan then in an interview also admitted that he has lost the copy of cipher. Maryam Aurangzeb said it is not a political matter but that of the national interest and the constitution, and it will be dealt legally. She regretted that Imran Khan compromised the national interest and violated Secrecy Act for his political interest. She said the matter will be taken to logical conclusion. And it should be taken to logical conclusion. Why not? Imagine that, when you actually go and be in a rally and then you hold a paper that, this is something which I've gotten, and, you kind of put the entire nation under stress because of that one particular cipher, and we eventually get to know that there's no reality behind it. Imagine what kind of game you have played. And when we talk about national security and the interest of the nation, you have definitely played with both of them.
Okay, so coming back to our topic, which is more about the tourism and what are the latest trend in the tourism. So we have seen that there is a stream or the diffusion of sustainability or eco-tourism into the tourism because of the climate change, because of the realities that the world or 21st century is now witnessing because of that, and how technology interplays into the intersection of the eco-tourism, sustainable tourism. So I would like to introduce our lovely guest in the studio, who happens to be associated with one of the best chains of the hotel industry when it comes to that. So I'm really glad that we have been joined by Dr. Moinuddin Saab. Assalamu alaikum, and thank you so much for coming to our show. And he also happens to be the corporate director of the Serena Hotels.
Wow, it's always great to have you. At times I feel like asking you for whether if I can come and take a dip in Serena swimming pool. They have two of them, right?
Right.
So it's always fantastic, but it's always good to have you, sir, because we get to learn quite a lot. The future generations who actually want to be a part of the hospitality industry, you've been telling them quite a lot about how to do that. And then when we talk about the education within the hospitality sector, the contribution of the Serena Hotels itself is commendable. But not just that, ladies and gentlemen. Now we really need to kind of look at things internationally and globally too. And for that, you certainly need such partners and associates who are going to come down over here, and whatever the best practices are, we apply them. And it's always a joint venture. We really need to contribute towards that. So to kind of talk about that, it was really surprising for me to see that somebody who actually did his MSc in chemistry and then strategy planning and then business development is somebody who will be helping us with that. So imagine, without any further ado, I'm very lucky that we've actually been joined by somebody whom we refer to as Mr. Patrice Dachterwell. Hello, assalamu alaikum, good morning, how are you?
Good morning, I'm very good, thank you very much.
Thank you very much for joining us. So obviously I want to talk about hospitality industry in the first place. In 2017, 6.9% of our GDP was by the hospitality industry, and in 2030 it is said to be more than $35 billion as well. But first things first, MSc chemistry and hospitality, what's the connection over here?
I knew this was coming.
Lovely.
Well, first of all, chemistry, I think, I've never practiced it, but
Yep.
I think it taught me a number of things, logic, analytical thinking, which I've been using all my life.
Yep.
And I think it's a very interesting parallel with hospitality education. a lot of students in hospitality actually end up in different worlds, and even if they've practiced it at the beginning, and they've learned, this customer first, customer centricity, and I think that remains for all their life, and that's very precious.
Yeah.
So, Dr. Moin Saab, coming to you, we have seen that there's a lot of capitalistic values in the tourism, right? And to dilute those values, we have seen that there is a concept springing up all around the globe, which is CSR, corporate social responsibility, right? Which means that if you are getting a lot of profit from the community, from the society, then you need to give back to that, right? So, there is a concept of this social responsibility in that element. So, do you want to explain the CSR element of the Serena hotels when it comes to that?
Thank you very much, Hajra and Shehzad. I was really in a fix. I thought you might be asking me the question about why men don't get love. Maybe Shehzad is going through midlife crisis. After the show, we'll come back to that.
Off in the crisis.
But seriously, I can share my 2 cents on that.
Sure.
Not that I work in tourism.
Sure, why not?
But coming to your answer, yes. I think every entity, when a business especially is working, so it's got a license to operate from the society.
Right.
So once a society allows a company to work, then it's also a two-way benefit, where the company should also make use of that social license and should share the benefits.
Right.
So this is the underlying concept of CSR, and in the hotel context, because it's tourism, it is footprints, so a company should work within the fence of that organization,
Right.
what they can do to reduce waste,
Right.
solid waste, effluents, emissions,
True.
and then your own carbon footprints.
Right.
Outside plantation, working on environment, especially Pakistan is a ecologically fragile country.
True.
So we should work on such projects which can give us good infrastructure and resilience, and something which is valuable to community.
Exactly. And sir, in addition to that, we certainly need to kind of get into the core values of the organization you're working with as well. Because when we talk about corporate social responsibility, these days it's a norm. Each and every organization out there is trying to do something to actually have that, very positive side towards their business, which is great, and I believe in it as well. But I believe that it really needs to come with an intent, and there needs to be an origin of it within the core values of the business you work for. So do you think that it is more of people telling you that, hey, you know what, we really need to fix that side, or is it the intent of the people behind the business?
So there are 2 aspects.
Sure.
One is a bolt-in, where you kind of put outside in, or something which is within, which we call it built-in.
True.
So in our organization, it's built-in. It's part of our DNA.
Wonderful.
So wherever we are, even in our buildings, we would showcase the local architecture, local materials, and definitely if you use local materials, that will be more environment friendly.
True.
More ecologically balanced, and more in sync with the local topography, local culture.
And I'm going to agree with that, because when you go visit the north of Pakistan, ladies and gentlemen, that's exactly what you're going to get to see. They're very hospitable. People will be there around to look after your kids. Imagine you're dining in a restaurant,
Right.
the waitresses are going to come in and, probably pick up your daughters and be like, hey, you know what, you take your meal, just relax, and, we're going to sort it out ourselves, which I believe is great, and it is built in. But now I'm going to come down to you. Over here in Pakistan, for the longest period of time, the challenge was, obviously the times have changed now, was education within the hospitality sector. How important do you believe is the education, or do you think it's the skill set? Either is it built in or bought in? Let's talk about that when we come down to the practices of hospitality sector.
Well, I think you can probably buy it in, but it has to be in order to build it in. And it's just like CSR. It has to be anchored in the organization, because you have to be there for the long term. Otherwise, if it's on the surface, it's not going to last very long.
True.
And I think Serena is a perfect example of that, both on the CSR side and also on the education and development of skills deep in the organization.
True.
Right.
But this whole purpose why I was asking you this question was that I've had a family of bureaucrats, and when we go back in time, I've seen that how they made it to those ranks, and it actually took them a longer period of time in their lives, because they weren't really CSPs. There's an examination which you really need to pass and then move on to those ranks. But now, do you think it is essential? Because, Dr. Saab might even think that, hey, you know what, Shehzad can actually be a good person, probably on the front desk or wherever. Because, he knows how to talk, he's compassionate, he will have that empathy, ethos, everything is embedded in him. So how important or do you think that you will value those skills which I have, or rather you would want a degree with me attached with all of those ethos I'm carrying? Let's start with you.
Well, I think employee retention is very important in all companies, especially in hospitality, where it's so hard to develop the right behaviors.
True.
If you don't give a career path to your employees, chances are they may not develop, they may not stay.
True.
So I think it's a real investment that you have to go through. A good service is something a lot of hotels manage.
True.
But the human touch on top of it, which I've found in the last 24 hours, I had people calling me by my first name just when I arrived. And this is what really makes the difference in my view.
Wow.
Okay, so coming back to Dr. Saab, so Dr. Saab, the souvenirs, they're a very important part of the hospitality industry because they are made by the local artisan and they tell a particular story of that. So when I do the tourism, especially globally or within the Pakistan, I want to purchase something that tells me the story of that particular area, right? So these brands are there all over the world. For example,
you hardly purchase anything from your own money.
Mark and Spencer.
She's expecting gifts quite a lot.
Oh my God, how did you get this impression? Okay, so I really don't want to go into the Zara or Mark and Spencer or these high-end brands because they're the same globally all over the world, right? But then when it comes to souvenirs which are made by the local artisans, they tell a different sort of a story and are also a good marketing tool when it comes to that. So what do you tell us about the Sarina, about their local artisan culture? And Sarina is all over the Pakistan, right? So does it depict the different cultures of the different provinces?
And the only hotel with an art gallery as well.
True, that is what.
Thank you very much. Yes, souvenirs, you know, whenever you go, souvenir has a story.
True.
Number one, it has a human touch, but some art or craft person would have made that souvenir. So that human touch is there, and definitely for souvenirs, you would look for something which is ethnic, which is local.
Right.
And or if you talk about art, for example, you would look something which is local.
True.
So definitely these brands are there on a multinational landscape.
True.
But for tourism,
right.
Even if you go to a museum, for example, you will come back, or you visit a fort, you will come back with maybe a small notebook or a small pen that would remind you of the trip.
Right.
In older times, there used to be postcards.
True.
So you used to send the postcards from that place to your friends, small, short messages. Right?
Right.
So it's the sense of memory attached to the trip.
Right.
So whenever.
Right.
And you really need to have that sense too as well, that you know this was this year where we went, you know, just like in our iPhones these days, you know, 2017, 19, and you're going to get those highlights.
I really wanted to add to this conversation because I do remember when I took the trip to Turkey, so Zara, Mark and Spencer, they have their own value. I'm not denying that. But when you go to their local bazaars or the spice bazaar there, you would sense very Turkishness there, or the lamps that they're made there, they have their, you know, indigenous touch there, which makes you feel so much important, and it reminds you of a lot of things that you're absorbing from that civilization, from that culture.
Thank you very much for sharing this, because this actually kind of reminded me that, you know, when it was my Mehndi, my mother actually ordered a few lamps from Turkey too as well. And you know, which obviously towards the end of my wedding ceremony, ladies and gentlemen, my sisters were fighting over whether who's going to keep those lamps too. So only 3 are left behind. I don't know where the rest of them went. But now I have a very serious question for you. Now imagine that we're talking about how people really need to educate themselves if in order to, they really want to climb that ladder of hierarchy. Now for people who travel, people like me, you know, because these days there's a new field which is opening up, and those people are known as travel hackers. You know, so they want to find the best deals, which places to go, what time to go on. How important do you think it is for the traveler or the tourist, him or herself, to be more educated than the hospitality sector so that they can actually reap the best benefits out of it?
That's a very tough question. No, I think relating to the previous point on the local crafts and, you know, unique products that you don't find back home or anywhere in the world, I think looking forward, this is probably what will make the difference. As a consumer, you know, you might be able to get a good deal on your travel if you're smart and if you use the tools. But are you going to get these unique experiences? Are you going to get these handicrafts that, you know, don't exist anywhere else, and the story that goes with it? The person that sold it to you? Probably not. And again, you know, that comes back to the human touch that goes beyond technology and basic service, and that I think nothing can beat.
Yeah, that's true too as well. So so what you're trying to say over here is that even for the people who are affiliated with the hospitality sector, it's important for them, and people who are actually going to go experience that sort of service, it's important for them whether what kind of a treat they are in for. And because half of the time what happens is that over here in Pakistan, since we do not have a lot of 5 stars and 7 stars,
True.
so people have their own hotels, and people have their own mindset of running it. So you cannot have the same expectation from somebody who's actually got their own rest house or a guest house or a hotel, somewhere in a rural town of Pakistan. But rather, when you come down to Serena or any other hotels, for that matter, maybe 5 stars, 7 star, the expectations can be up there. How do you think that we can have the same standard of the hospitality sector, because this is something which is required for a developing country like Pakistan?
Well, first of all, when I was mentioning the human touch, that doesn't mean the basics shouldn't be in place, and even more than the basics. So your technology has to be there, your service has to be there, of course, and then the human touch will make the difference. But if you go to smaller operations, the expectations will be different, but not necessarily lower.
And that's a good answer. But how?
I think these smaller operations have to probably play more on the individual care. You were mentioning that your children could be taken care of. This is an experience as well.
True.
This makes a difference, and I'm actually,
and it does.
I would be a customer of that very happily.
Right.
So I think you have to play on your strength. You cannot compete with a huge hotel chain that is up there, but you can bring something that is more of a family oriented touch.
Exactly.
That might be unique as well.
So the comfort is there.
So you need to find what makes you different and what you're good at. This is Dr. Moin would say this is strategy 101.
And just to tell you, it was I believe it was in Hunza Altidford or Baltidford. There's a restaurant which is actually run by women only.
Oh,
and
lovely.
so we ordered food which was very expensive in the first place. I never knew, till the time the bill came to me, and then I was like, hey, you know what? The meal's actually going to come. So we thought that for whatever they have served us were the starters, but they weren't. That was the actual food. I was like, okay, I think.
That's why you said the men are not loved enough. Yeah.
I think you can bring the kids back. We're done with it. But that's a part of you roaming around. So for people who are actually going to visit Hunza and you go to Altidford or Baltidford, one of these, so you go. Please make sure that you meet those people who are out there as well. They're very warm. They will make sure that you do not have any sort of discomfort. And, they just make you feel like at home, So imagine one of your kid is crying and, they hold your kid and be like, hey, you know what, sir, you continue. And you're still thinking the meal's going to come. But that's the only meal. So it's not going to be long enough anyway.
Lovely. So coming back to Dr. Moin Saab, when we are talking about the tourism trend and hospitality sector, so it is very important, for example, the people who are called the micro entrepreneurs, right? The local chai walas or the vendors who are there, because when you go outside, you're going to ask them for the route or for any other thing that you want to experience them. How much it is important that we also train them, because they are also representative of the tourism sector as a whole.
Yeah. Yes, Serena, we do.
Lovely.
And before that, I'll just inform Shehzad, it's Altid.
Altid. Yes.
We have female-led restaurant where all the females, they work. We also have a music center next to it where the kids are learning.
And even Serena's got some rooms under over there too as well. They were under construction when I went.
But next time, give me a buzz. We'll make sure that we'll match the order.
I'm sorry.
But on this, as you said, micro entrepreneurs, once even the Airbnb started, what they used to do, the owners, was to keep some loose change by your bedside.
Okay.
Because whenever you are in a new city or a new country, you would require basic loose change to avail a bus ticket or to make a call home.
Right.
So that was just a very small gesture.
Right.
1, 2, 3 pounds by your side.
Right.
By the time you reach to a new country, you don't have the currency. By the time you don't have the currency conversions or using credit card. So you have basic on the go. Right. So that small memory of finding some 2, 3 pounds by your bedside is a lot of wow for you.
That's true.
So these are small actions that micro entrepreneurs can do.
Right.
Or maybe keep some travel maps or suggest some routes for you.
Right.
Or give you some kind of like time suggestions, like what you can do in the evening, how is nightlife like.
Right.
So there are a lot of tips that micro entrepreneurs can further, we call it enriching your itinerary. whatever your time is.
Exactly. And sir, in addition to that, because, since we're talking about micro entrepreneurs, so I happen to be one in hospitality sector. So we just opened up our own apartment. We had an apartment to ourselves, two of us, partners, we ventured into booking.com.
Mashallah.
So now what happens is, obviously we've got all the food brochures and whatnot. But do you think that, in days to come, this will actually kind of have an impact on big chains like Serena too? Because now a lot of people are focusing onto it, especially when we talk about Pakistan as a developing country. Everywhere we go, we do not have those places to stay. And almost every time, that time of the year when the tourists are actually supposed to go in that weather, it's very rushy, the rates go up. So booking.com and Airbnb have been great help. So for wherever the infrastructure is not available, do you think that it's not going to keep that concentration of the 5-star chains or the 7-star chains up to that mark? Or do you think it will give them the competition? Or now the hotel chains will think about having their own infrastructure?
It is marketplace. So I think more and more people will join the marketplace. Booking.com also serves the hotel industry.
True.
So hotel industry is one of
Gives
the
us
largest.
cheaper rates too as well.
So and same goes for Airbnb or apart hotels, we call it, or apartments on lease. So all this is good. All this would make the market more deeper, will give more options to people. But hotels primarily have a different market as compared to a person staying in apartment. Hotel, we would consider it's more of a business travel if it's a city, vis-a-vis an apartment where a person may go for leisure.
True.
Or may go for some long stays as compared to hotel.
Yeah,
the market is slightly different.
But the question is that, don't you think that, with all of that concentration within the business of hospitality, that people or hotels, big chains like Serena or Marriott over here in Pakistan will actually think about, increasing their infrastructure rather than, giving them the opportunity to take their business away?
There is always some kind of a carrying capacity.
Because I've seen sites for Serena Hotel in Hunza too as well. I don't know whether you will start to construct or not.
That's a circuit concept. You need to have more and more nodes. So you populate it better so that we can serve you in all the cities that we are, or in all the resorts that we can offer.
Wow.
But still you cannot capture the whole market. So you have to have, how we call it, collaborative competition. So where there's collaboration, at the same time competition. If you are full, you're going to refer your rooms to somebody else.
True.
So everybody kind of, makes money, and everybody gets a sustainable proposition.
And what does the West think about that?
Well, I would agree. I think competition is very healthy. It brings innovation. It keeps everybody on their toes. And that's always good in the grand scheme of things. It also tells us that the younger generation is looking for something slightly different, typically less time in the room and more time in communal areas of the hotel or wherever establishment they're at. And also they've been competition, but they've also grown the pie. They've also made travel people who didn't travel before. And these people, might also stay in a hotel. Consumers are not monolithic. They do different things.
True.
So I think all in all, it's probably a positive contribution to the industry.
Exactly. And probably, in days to come, having PlayStation 5 inside the room, something of that sort will actually help us too, because, even we love to play FIFA or all sorts of games. That's the only thing which the hotels are leaving behind these days.
Yeah, I'm very low on the learning curve on this one.
Okay, so Mr. Petris, I really wanted to ask you, so tourism is very vulnerable to climate change, and it's also one of the contributor towards the climate change also when it comes to that. So what exactly are the trends in the sustainable tourism, and where is Pakistan lying in that equation?
Mm-hmm. Well, this was actually a topic we were discussing this morning with Mr. Moeen.
Right.
And you're absolutely right. It's climate change is impacting all activities and tourism first and foremost. So I think it's extremely important that companies are well positioned versus this trend in a CSR manner. And again, that cannot be on the surface. It has to be for the long term. Otherwise, it doesn't work, and consumers find out very quickly.
Right.
So you really have to be serious about it.
Right.
I think it will also change the way we all travel.
Right.
Probably, and here I don't have a crystal ball, but I would say, for longer periods and less short stays, perhaps.
Right.
which is probably beneficial for established chains, I would suspect.
Right.
And these are only some of the effects. There's probably many more.
Right. So, Dr. Moin, coming to you, I really wanted to ask you, because I was told you before when the show started that I'm a graduate of finishing school, and they took us to Serena because Serena is an institute in itself, and they taught us that, you know, how beds are made, how the color palettes you need to come up, especially when it comes to the color palettes and the interior of that room.
Aesthetics, yeah.
Yes, aesthetics of that. So I really wanted to ask you, does Serena also incorporates or give trainings to the people out there? Because I'm really glad that the education or the subjects of the tourism or hospitality sectors are coming up in the universities too, because I think Pakistan is a good market for that matter, and it's not very saturated like I think West is already very saturated when it comes to the tourism. So what is your take on that?
Thank you very much. Good to hear that you are a PF finishing school graduate.
Yeah.
Yes, we open our doors to everybody from
Lovely.
Qasim University, from NUST, all the universities,
Lovely.
public, private, also with NAFTEC we are working.
Right.
We are also training small micro entrepreneurs
Okay.
all the way from far-flung valleys who want to open very small facilities. So we bring them, we train them,
Right.
and we give them orientation to the industry.
Right.
Whatever lessons they take back, and then they can kind of implement whatever works for them. So we are always open, and it's also cross learning. We also learn,
Obviously.
like, you know, how the market is changing.
Right.
I remember there was one person from Chitral. He had only 2 rooms.
Okay.
And every year he meets me, he adds 2 more rooms.
Lovely.
So now he's got 6 rooms. His name is Muhammad Ali. So whenever in winter he is here,
Lovely.
he's going to show me his brochures, and he makes door-to-door sale calls.
Lovely.
And he started from 2 rooms. So it's so heartening to see, you know, even micro entrepreneurs.
Right.
And no wonder Shahzad will be having a couple of chains of apartments on
Yeah,
booking.com.
we're thinking about it. Somebody just called us yesterday and they wanted the apartment for an entire month. You know, we're still figuring it out whether what rate we really need to decide for.
Okay.
But yes, that's a separate story. But now, sir, coming down to, you know, I wanted to have this discussion from the very perspective of the people who actually run these big chains and hotels.
Right.
Now imagine that, you know, since you're in a developing country, obviously that's the first challenge there and then.
Right.
Imagine for somebody who've had an industry and they had to give up on that industry because the energy resources weren't enough, and then the bills started to build up, and, you know, we couldn't really cope up with that, so we really need to shut down the industry and move it to another country. Now imagine from the hospitality sector's point of view, these are the everyday challenges. For a person like you, happens to be corporate director, I think everything's going to go around. Imagine just yesterday, last night, you know, it was thrice that the electricity was gone, and then, you know, you were sleeping in a room where there's no fan, no AC, no nothing. But now, for all of these challenges, how do you think that these chains actually make it up to the mark? Because we have higher expectations as customers, and on the other hand, you know, you're spending way a lot more money than you're making it, and that's something which people need to realize, which is why not a lot of bigger chains exist in Pakistan, because they do know that it's not very conducive to have business within the Pakistani market. So how do you deal with such challenges?
First, you know, as hotel managers, we have to become business managers, and we see every hotel as a business unit. So you take certain decisions based on the business sustainability. Secondly, definitely, infrastructure is a major cost in the hotels.
True.
Building hotels and then maintaining them. So the rates, apparently they look high, but even sometimes you don't even do full cost recovery.
Okay.
If you look at your food costs rising so high, energy costs. So it's ongoing managing your business the way you do. At the same time, you don't penalize the customer, so you give customers the value.
True.
You take certain hits to make sure that the customer loyalty is there. Customer should come back to you in terms of loyalty programs, in terms of arranging events in a way where your hotel become magnets for people to come.
True.
They become more like culture centers. In our case, we attract people because of our culture, our CSR. So there are different programs that we make around, because like a factory, as you said, you cannot lock your equipment, take it to some other country
True.
and start making shirts.
True.
Here a hotel is going to stay. So we kind of give life to the hotel. And I was browsing through some internet yesterday. I found a website based in UK, and they are now selling small destination for shootings.
Right.
For small
Right.
programs.
Right.
They are even subletting their kitchens,
Right.
their studio spaces.
Right.
So even if they have a small space and if you want to host a cooking show,
Right.
so you just lease it for an hour.
We've been
You-
doing one with one of your former employees.
Excellent, excellent. Good to hear that.
Yes.
So all these models are coming up, which give sustainability.
Right.
For small micro entrepreneur, this is other income.
Exactly.
So with technology now, there's a lot is possible.
And that's exactly something which I wanted to ask you, Mr. Patrice, and that is that you obviously come from a country where the energy resource is not a problem, and when we talk about human resource, even within Europe, I don't think that's a problem too. So what happens is that for hotels, from the West, what we have seen is that that the governments will definitely put them or show them some support so that the business continues. May it be COVID, you were on those panels, all of those hotels, people were quarantining in it, and so the business kept on going one way or the other. But all of a sudden, you're in a country where in Asia, there's a lot of lack of resources, and to fulfill them every single day is going to be a challenge and a headache at the same time. That these are the basic resources we had over there, and all of a sudden I'm here where the resources are not sufficient. So from every single day, you're going to make sure that the ends meet in a very perfect manner, and that's something which we expect from the hospitality sector. Do you think it's going to be a challenge over here for you to overcome that?
Well, I think first of all, energy issues in Europe
Yeah, these
might
days.
actually
I'm
come
sorry,
more
yeah,
and more
these days,
pressing,
yes.
but time will tell. I think Dr. Moin already built a lot on this topic. When there's so many constraints on your operation, you need to think of your top line and your bottom line. When you think CSR, typically what's good for the planet is also good for the wallet. Conserving energy, being smart about it in every little things you do in your operations. And on the top line, creating value, being innovative, and bringing additional service and value to your consumers.
True.
In every little ways possible, and Dr. Moin mentioned a lot of initiatives, and that's going to keep your rooms full, basically. So work on the top line, your consumers, and on the,
it will
on
have
the
a
bottom
domino
line at
effect.
the same time. But it's a lot of different little things that need to be coordinated, and it's a lot of
Okay,
work.
so I really wanted to ask you, sir, that we have seen when the Queen Elizabeth passed away in England, we have seen that there were long queues of the people who came from different parts of the world, because the British monarchy is famous and it has adherents in different parts of the world when it comes to that. And we have seen that a lot of hotels, they were filled up because people came from different places from around the world. And we've also seen that the prices also went up to that, because obviously there was a shortage of that, or maybe the demand was so much that. So from the people who are sitting outside and they're witnessing this situation, they might call it that the hoteliers are extorting money from the people. But is it really the case of that, or is it the market which is in the play of
It's
the
the
demand
case
supply?
everywhere.
Yeah, or is it the demand supply,
Supply.
supply that is meeting the end?
Supply and demand.
Okay.
Yeah, that's probably what it is at the end of the day. This practice of varying prices is revenue management.
Right.
And when there's a lot of demand, obviously prices go up, especially if you book at the last minute.
Right.
On the other hand, when there's little demand, you might get a great deal.
Right.
So I suppose sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. But
Right.
I think behind your point is something very important, is consumer acceptability. There's only so far I think the industry should push the logic. On one hand, if you charge so much, your image will suffer.
That's
And
true.
on the other hand, if you charge too little, your image will suffer as well. So, I think these things should be kept.
It's a dilemma.
Exactly. Which is why now the
Right.
last 5 minutes are actually dedicated to a conversation on a very lighter note. I mean, questions me and Hajab always had, as kids, whether what do hotels really do. So imagine, said, we're going to get started with that. So I was in Karachi, I was hosting an event, was at a 5-star. And, I wanted to take a break for 5 minutes. So what I did was that right alongside the hall where I was hosting, there was an alley which was used by the people of the hotels or the staff of the hotels. So it was very different. When I was in the hall, it was spick and span, it was clean, it was very hygienic. All of a sudden, I stepped into that alley and it was very different. I was like, hey, you know what? It's just really messy. So the things in the front of what we see as consumers are very different from what they are at the back end. why don't you think that we really need to have the same standard of cleanliness and hygiene, may it be in front of the customer or at the back of the customer?
Oh.
I'm sorry.
No, it's just like media.
Yes.
In hospitality, it's I'll come up to it. If you look at the back end of the media, how the studio looks
Yeah.
as a guest is different from what viewers would see us, or how your control room is organized, messy
Yeah.
cables and all that. However, the basic essentials should be there.
That was a good comeback, though.
No, no.
I'm going to actually request my producer
Since you
to
said-
actually
yeah.
share the entire studio now. If we can show the audiences, please go ahead.
No, just on a lighter note,
Yeah.
and this is just to draw a comparison and not to take a dig on anybody. It's just, we call it front of the house and back of the house. So these are technical terms. What we do, like you, is choreograph the experience for customer.
True.
So, like in a theater, you see ropes hanging and all that. Once the spotlight is there, you see a different stage. Same, hospitality is the same,
Okay.
where all our staff, they come from a place, they take baths, they shower, they change, they dress up, they come, they perform, they go back.
True.
So we call it choreographing the experience.
Okay. Wonderful.
And it's part of the service.
All right.
Right.
But as far as the minimum essential hygiene or your occupational safety, I think it should be the same between front of the house and back of the house.
So I think you're going to love our choreography today as well.
Okay, so
Another
Yeah.
question. Another
Okay.
question. So I've always been in an argument with my cousins, and since they're from Faisalabad, and
Yeah.
Serena's got a branch in Faisalabad too.
okay.
So
lovely.
they would always tell me, while I was growing up, that Serena is actually a 7-star. So it has always been a confusion with me and my cousins whether it's a 5-star or a 7-star. So why don't you tell us?
Stars is basically a government rating.
Okay.
Yeah. But normally stars are at about 5-star, little that I know. Patrice can help
Really?
me in that.
In
Yeah.
most places, yes.
There's no concept of a 7-star that we know.
Okay.
Rest is all marketing. Like if you make a tower, and if I want to make a taller tower than you, then I put a stick on my tower, right? So I say my tower is kind of taller,
It's
than yours.
Yes.
Right.
So it's the same analogy.
Exactly.
So Dr. Saab, I really wanted to ask you, and I would also like Mr. Patrice to answer that question, is that in Pakistan we see the tourism mostly limited to hoteling and the food and having that experience. But globally, if you see the trend, so there is wellness and fitness tourism which is springing up. People are going there, they are getting the yoga classes and whatnot, right? That would sort of spiritually uplift them, or that should be an enlightening experience for them. So do you think Pakistan is going in that direction? Because Serena is a very good chain when it comes to the hoteling industry. I think it is one of the best. Do we expect that there is something concerning the wellness and fitness which is also coming up?
Yes. For
Okay,
domestic market, millennials and digitals, as they are joining the workforce,
Right.
they have disposable income.
Okay.
They go back, they sign up for yoga retreats, they sign up for
True.
trekking retreats, they
True.
sign up for safaris. So
Right.
this trend is picking up quite fast. And then there's this sharing economy where you book a trip and then you tend to put it on Instagram,
Right.
Twitter, and I want people to like it. So
Right.
this sharing concept has again also gained traction.
Right.
But going further on health and wellness, like medical tourism, like Turkey,
Right.
or health and wellness, if we talk about Bali,
Right.
we are still not there. So still we have some gap
Right.
to cover. Yeah.
Exactly. What about you? What's your take on this?
No, I fully agree. I think Pakistan has a lot of potential in terms of cultural richness, nature, obviously, and the whole hospitality, that is so deeply rooted in this country. So perhaps there is some ground still to cover, as Dr. Moin said. But I think there's a lot of potential to be exploited.
Exactly. And in addition to that, I think in days to come, there will be a requirement for people who are actually going to, represent the hotels and
Right.
will actually work like photographers, because, speaking about Altit Fort as well, where
Right.
they, the person who's actually going to take you on a tour takes such amazing photographs that, you just cannot help it and post them on your Instagram too. That this is something which I feel in days to come,
Right.
people will certainly get a documented trip of theirs, wherever they're going to go. And if people are going to start to invest in it, as of now, the hotels or the big chains, they're going to earn a lot of money. So imagine you're on a
Right.
tour and we'll give you complete pictures, photographs, professional, and a documentary on top of that,
Right.
and you pay 50,000 rupees extra. So imagine if there's 100 people, who are touring and visiting, they will certainly be happy. Hey, you know what? I'm all sorted. I certainly do not have to carry the camera and just experience this all. Do you think that in days to come that can happen?
That can happen also on the flip side. We also as a company share a lot of endorsement of our customers.
True.
The way our guests take certain pictures with their permission, then we retweet those pictures.
Okay.
Because with the experience that the customers go through, the angles that they capture sometimes from their rooms or from the balconies, those are amazing.
So it's from both ends.
Yes, from both ends, and we share the same customer endorsements with their, consent.
Wow.
On our own media, this is what our customers say. You know, it's far better than putting an ad for ourselves or blowing our own trumpet. If a customer is saying, that's the
making them the brand
voice of
ambassadors
customer.
of that.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah,
lovely.
that's
Thank you so
wonderful.
much, Dr. Saab, for enlightening
you.
us about
Thank
the
you.
hoteling industry and the tourism. Thank you so much, Mr. Petries, for coming to our show and enlightening us about the subject. And one thing I really wanted to reiterate is that we need to make sure that we are a responsible tourist when we go out there, and we need not to disturb the socio-economic or the cultural aspects of the host community there.
True.
Because a lot of time there were complaints coming up from the Gilgit-Baltistan, especially how people are littering there, and especially the host communities, how they're getting disturbed by this so much influx of very irresponsible tourists when it comes to that.
Exactly. And in addition to that, what I want is that, whenever, I'm visiting a place and, I'm in a hotel room, I certainly do not want calls from reception. Sir, we need your ID card. Sir, we need this. Sir, hey, you know what? I booked in for two nights. Whenever I'm coming, going, you can ask me for that. As soon as I check in the room, I'm certainly not up for giving my ID cards for you to photocopy or do whatever. You do that business in the first place, or either when you see me coming or going, you can ask for that gently too as well. Please make sure that you do not bother your guests whenever they are around. But for people who are out there, there's a lot of potential. By 2030, it's going to be a $36 billion industry. And just like, Dr. Saab mentioned over here that, he's in conversation with somebody who opened up his 2 rooms. And every year he's been adding 2 rooms as well. So, he's at 6 rooms as of now. It's a great potential. The industry is going to grow. Ladies and gentlemen, these floods, inshallah, will go away. And, we will learn to build up structures which are going to be climate friendly as well. And these things are going to help us in future to be micro-entrepreneurs or non-entrepreneurs. Please make sure that you take that initiative, that you have that intent, and develop on that very insight you have within that industry, and it will help you in days to come and your future generations. Till the next time, please make sure that you write to us on our Facebook page, which is with the name of
World This Morning.
On Twitter.
World This Morning.
On Daily Motion and YouTube.
World This Morning.
And the fabulous repeat is going to be at 4:05 today. Ladies and gentlemen, till the next time, look out yourselves. 1, 2, 3. Good morning.
morning.
Have a great day.